you. You guys can sit close as they delunched us at the airport this morning. Never had that happen. I had to sit in the plane while they sprayed us and delunched us all before they let us off the plane, but it was good. So the Calgary model, you've probably heard a lot about it, so I'm actually going to tell you what's all about the Calgary model, and the where's, the why's, the how's, why we went this path, and what we hope to get and what we did do. So quick overview, some of the thoughts behind why we went down this path. A little bit about animal services, what we do. The officer training and behavior. In my world, you cannot invest enough in training your staff and giving them the tools to do a great job and the authority that goes with those tools. The importance of public education, I'll speak about it greatly. That's another incredibly key piece. And of course, continuous improvement. You're never really done. You'll always be building the model. So when I first got into this business, I went through my shelter, then I went to some neighboring shelters, and I started to come up with some strange thoughts. And the first one is that in North America, we don't really have a problem with stray, nuisance, aggressive animals, or vicious animals. We have a problem with responsible pet ownership. When I went through those shelters, and I still do this, if I went through a shelter, the first dog I'm going to see, I'm going to say, sit. And I almost guarantee he will. Or I'll see a cat in a cage, I'll open the cage, I'll take the cat out. Has anyone handled a feral cat? You wouldn't do that with a feral cat. But that cat will lay in my arms, cradle around, that dog will sit. That told me these dogs had had human interaction, that actually been involved in human relationships. So how did they end up in a shelter? Because somewhere that human relationship failed. And that's part of this model about is that preemptive thing. How do we get there before? And then do we have people here from the animal rescue world? Number one cause animals get surrendered to a shelter. They'll tell you there's an allergy. They'll tell you the landlord won't let them keep it. It's a behavior issue. Always. And I've seen people leave my shelter and sit in the car and cry for half an hour. And I think if we could just get to them, because once that human mind has come up with a solution, that solution being surrender, it's hard to turn. If you get that first sign of a problem and give them the tools, you can prevent that surrender. And you can add another great animal to your community. So I heard Graham, we've talked about this at length, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That's nothing new. I mean, Albert Einstein, that's his quote. You'll always, and that's the whole basis of science. Science says a good experiment is you do it 30 times, get the same answer, it's valid. So why as people do we keep doing something that isn't working again and again? You have to change something in the equation. So for us, I shifted from that traditional animal control model, which was a heavy enforcement-based model, and shifting to a responsible pet ownership model. We're putting more onus on and actually telling the pet owner what the expectation is and what the consequences are, as well as what supports we can offer to help you improve that. This is, I don't want to offend any politicians, but in North America, this really explains our problem. And Alex Trebek, he's an American intellectual. The political system is simple. Limited time information. Typically, politicians work within electoral frameworks, 3 or 4 year cycle, whatever. Rational ignorance, short memorizes, low feedback, misaligned incentives. Society, in contrast, is complex, evolving, high feedback, and incentive driven. We've seen such a shift in the last 5 years just in social media. And you know yourself, if there's an issue involving an animal, it goes viral no matter hours, and it's across the world. So it's something we have to adapt to. That's about accountability to the people we serve. The animal services, that's what we call us. We don't call ourselves animal control. Basically, responsible pet ownership. How do we do that? Through licensing, public education, and when necessary, enforcement. Number one goal of an animal services government-based organization is to protect people from animals. Humane societies protect animals from people. Now, having said that, they're almost commanded to work in concert together. In my world, I couldn't protect people from animals without careful care and concern for the treatment of the animal, fairness to the animal. Humane society cannot disregard human safety. So we had to work together. We were commanded to do that. Number one goal is get pets home, get lost pets home. The most cost-effective thing you can do to empty a shelter is return the animal home with a bit of education. Care for impounded animals that come in all kinds of conditions. Make sure they've got the proper care, medical treatment, properly housed, exercise, everything they need to be balanced. Run subsidized spay and neuter programs. We're big believers in spay and neuter. It's, I think, one of the most important things we can do. But it can be cost prohibitive to some people. So we, through our licensing program, funded free spay and neuters for people in low income brackets. And of course, getting compliance to the responsible pet ownership bylaw. Starting with a vision. And this was basically point form what our vision was. when we got into this. And the first one was, we wanted to create a government department that citizens actually want to work with. So if you're going to build a responsible pet owner model, it's going to involve actually working with people. And often in a non-adversarial manner, you want to build confidence, you want to build partnerships, relationships, and trust. So we wanted somebody you could trust to come and work with. If you had a problem with your dog, you should be able to come to us and talk about it, get some help. Not be afraid that your dog's going to be taken away and euthanized. We want to create a collaborative environment with our animal interest groups. We have so many experts in the community that some of them are just small rescues. There's one Meow Foundation that just dealt with feral cats. Nobody knows more about feral cats than these people, about socializing ferals and setting up healthy colonies. So we wanted to eliminate euthanasia as an animal management strategy. We didn't feel that that was really a strategy at all. We wanted to focus on humane animal management strategy, kind of a no more homeless pets philosophy. If anyone's familiar with Best Friends in the US, big welfare group, I've done a lot of work with them, I still work with them. The no more homeless pets, every pet should be in a home. And we were going to do that by first return to owner. The best thing, most cost effective, return lost pets home with some education. We set a policy of no healthy adoptable animal shall ever be euthanized. We used our clinic and veterinary skills to make more unclaimed animals adoptable. We utilized behavior modification to correct some of the issues that would allow an animal to become adopted. And of course, programs to teach and support responsible pet guardianship. Reduce aggressive animal incidents. That was a primary goal right from the start, was reduce those. And the last one is to be self-supporting without asking the city council for any tax dollars. So how do you move from a vision like that into action? It's really simple. And this is where we kind of get into what the model is, because the Calgary model, I tell people, is not plug and play. It's a process. And if you follow the process, you'll end up with a Sydney model, a Melbourne model. You'll actually key into what is most important in your community. And that's the most important thing. So the 6-step program, identify the issues, and I'm going to detail these. Engage stakeholders, build processes that actually work, educate people on how to use the system. We target a 95% voluntary compliance rate with animal issues. That means that 95% of the 25,000 cases that are investigated a year for different things, 95% are resolved without taking people to court, and successfully resolved by a compliance model working with people. When necessary, that 5% backup enforcement. We don't believe in scofflaws. While we have no BSL or even pet limits in Calgary, we do have some of the toughest regulations in the world on people who house or have aggressive animals that they're not dealing properly with. Community safety is paramount. And lastly, you have to measure things. You know, and I think we heard about that. If you don't know how many dogs you have, it's pretty hard to measure how things are going. Are they getting better or getting worse? Identifying the issue. What we look for, what are the behaviors that are causing problems in our community or threatening public safety? What is the desired outcome that we want to get? And do we have the authority to do it? If not, who does? So I picked these two because they come up everywhere I go meet with people. BSL and pet limits. So BSL, is the issue a particular breed or is the issue aggressive canine behavior? And I can tell you it's aggressive canine behavior. It doesn't matter what the breed is. And I like your car analogy because I use that one a lot myself. Imagine, because I like to imagine, I'm driving down the highway in my Porsche Turbo Carrera, capable of 325 kilometers an hour, but it's a 100-kilometer speed limit. And I'm 100 dead on the money, not 1K over. I get stopped by the police, and they give me a ticket for speeding. I said, but I wasn't speeding. Yes, but this car is capable of doing 325, so we're giving you a ticket for 325 because it's going to do it sooner or later. We just know it because it's a Porsche. And that's the kind of mentality you have to get down to, is that what are we trying to regulate? So when you misidentify the issue, and I've done a lot of extensive work in the US on this with BSL, as soon as you misidentify, say all of a particular breed X are bad dogs, you have now polarized your community. So everybody who has a dog like that is a good dog is your mortal enemy. Everybody who knows that person and knows that dog to be a great dog is your mortal enemy. And you're going to spend a small fortune in court fighting these battles, as they have in the US, as you do in Australia, because it doesn't, and the thing that disturbs me the most, everyone I look at, they have not reduced the overall number of bites in the community. And when we look at the history, you mentioned the German Shepherd in North America. Early 1900s, it was the Bloodhound, was the devil dog. By 1960, it was the German Shepherd. In the 70s, it was the Doberman Pinscher. In the 80s, it became the Rottweiler, in the 90s, and the 2000s, the Pit Bull. Now it's shifting to the bigger dogs. So you're into the Mastiffs, you're into the Dobos, King Corsos, really big. So it shifts. The Pit Bull's actually kind of dropping out of the limelight. So it's a cyclical thing, so we can identify that. There's no one breed. But you know, with a human problem, in my personal opinion, we could get into a long discussion on, it's people often grab, not all people, but some people who are going to have a dog like that gets in trouble, gravitate towards it because of perception of power. The dog empowers me, it makes me powerful, it makes me strong, and they're not a good owner. Pet limits, same thing. Issue number of animals, or is the issue related to noise, smell, or the care being given to the animals? It's the care, the noise, the smell, the nuisance factors. But we have plenty of laws that deal with those things. So in Calgary, we didn't limit. Now, if you were not a responsible pet owner, I had the authority to get an order issued against your property limit, how many on that specific property for that specific person. But it was based on the facts and the evidence and the well-being of the animal and the well-being of the community. Engaging stakeholders. We really want to educate the public on what the issues are, what you're talking about. Gather people's opinions on the issues and the solutions. In government, we have a tendency to go to people with a solution. And really what the public want to do is you want to be engaged. You want to know what you're doing, what you're trying to fix, how what you're talking about is going to do anything, and what do they think about it. Give people the opportunity to be heard. People who feel that they understand what you're proposing for a law, they've had a chance to be heard, their opinions have been heard, and they see the benefit, will comply. You'll get voluntary compliance on it, guarantee it. We learned that in cat licensing. My predecessor tried to license cats. It's always a dicey issue. With no public engagement, we had 600 angry people picketing city council the day it was a council. You can imagine how much council wants to hear from 600 angry people, each one with their right to 5 minutes. So they said, we'll never bring that up again. But we did. And when we took it after 2 years of consultation with the public, we had 6 people show up to talk to it, 3 against and 3 for. But within a couple of years, we had 55% of cats licensed. Our save rate on cats have gone to 82%. And the Canadian average save rate for cats is 7%. So, again, proved it. You also want to measure support or opposition to the proposal. If you don't engage the public, you won't know ahead of time if you're going to be walking into one of those traps. And no politician ever wants to be put in that position. So you need to measure and engage that. If the public is overwhelming against what you're proposing, and you need to go back and do some homework. You've got a lot of work to do because you will not be successful until the public come on board with you. So who will be affected by the regulations? Well, the reality is everybody, but especially community animal experts, public victims of an incident. We always forget to talk to them. I'm always amazed at how many victims of an incident don't want the dog killed, but they want the owner dealt with. So what will their position be? What are their interests? If anyone does any work in conflict resolution, those are key words, positions and interests. A position is something you've decided, an interest is what got you there. We have to move them from that position, and that's what a breed ban is about. Someone's in a position that's the only solution. We have to move them to the interest of public safety and animal safety. That's where you have to start having a conversation, the dialogues. Processes at work. We use actually a standard business project model called SMART. It's developed by the University of Calgary, but any good business model works. Gather data, what's the current state of the community? It goes back to your comment on stats. If you don't know how many dogs you have in your community, how can you plan the right resources to deal with that? If you don't know how many bites you have, how do you know how big a problem you have? You know, if you had 200 bites last year, but you only had 300 dogs, you've got a huge problem. So you have to be able to weigh that and measure that against something. Get your community vision. What's the state? What would you like it to be? So again, you have to have a goal. You have to set targets. What facts do you have available? What do you need to find out and validate? These are all just part of building the process. Get the stakeholders involved at the solution level. Don't just tell them what you're going to do. Tell them how you're going to measure and report back on the progress. Be realistic how long it will take. Identify milestones. And remember that regulations are not the whole solution. What needs to be done to support it? Which starts with public education. Public education is the most powerful tool in changing human behavior. And we know that if we're going to change animals in the community, we have to change the human behavior first. The animals are reflective of human behavior and the support they're getting from the human side. We want knowledgeable citizens. We want them to know why we have the rules, why they're important. Give people good information that supports making good decisions. And of course, it all supports a perception of fairness. So when we got down to this, little story I tell about my beloved aunt. She has two Shih Tzus, nice little dogs. One weighs 23 pounds, the other weighs 26. And even aunt, we've known Shih Tzus don't go that big. And she thinks she is the best dog owner in the world because when she has Sunday dinner, the dogs have a place setting at the table. They're having ham and mashed potatoes and gravy, and then they go for a drive to the Dairy Queen ice cream. But so we thought, well, that's a good example because what makes a good responsible pet owner? She thinks she's the best. But what she's actually done is rob those dogs of 30% of their life. The good news is she moved out of Calgary, not in her jurisdiction. But the first thing to say is it's hard to deal with relatives and friends. And people often ask if I've ever written a friend a ticket. No, but my staff have. And don't ever send your friend the bills because they won't get you off. The rule is if you say you're one of my friends, you get 2 tickets. Because my friends would never do that. So anyway, first thing, license to provide permanent ID for your pet. That's the ticket home. When an animal gets lost, that's what gets animals home. And I like the microchip. Some people don't. I think they work as long as they're registered. That's a big key thing, and it should have access to the database. But it's also about accountability. When you license a pet that is your pet for life, that's saying that you are accepting the responsibilities that come with that pet, and we're here to help you get to those. Spaying and neuter pets, again, unless you're a qualified breeder and working with one, most people are better off with the pet spayed and neutered. We found that solves a lot of problems in a big community. We're at 1.2 million people now. Provide the right training, physical care, socialization, medical attention for companion pets. So basically all the physical needs of your pet need to be met. And then don't allow your pet to become a threat or a nuisance in the community. And we tell people, if you can do those 4 simple things, a couple of great things happen. You get, in Calgary, you get to have whatever kind of pet you want, as many as you want, and number 2, the government's not on your doorstep, because you've complied to those 4 simple things. So working with our humane partners, we thought Principle 5, which is just about done under development, is about the ethical procurement. Because we don't have a lot of puppy mills in Canada, most of them are in Quebec. In Western Canada, we don't really have a lot, but it's become that and the issue of sale of companion animals in pet stores. So that first ask yourself, the first question, is this the right time to bring a companion animal to you? Do you have the time, do you have the resources to do it right? That goes back to educating people before they get started. Research on your companion animal's physical needs, what to expect from medical, food, and care costs, what type of training, socialization, and exercise will be needed. Can you provide that over the next 10 to 20 years? And we ask people those questions before we adopt them. We really kind of put them through the mill. Are you ready to do this? And if the answer is yes, then we're ready to help you. And lastly, supports companion animals only from credible resources or rescues or ethical breeders. So we want to get away from the whole puppy mill and retail sale thing. Enforcement is the last step. If everything else fails, there must be consequences. Human behaviors will not change without consequences. Consequences can be positive or negative. So at the front end, we have a lot of positive consequences. But for that few percent that will not comply and will not change, perhaps they like having an aggressive dog, we have to have significant consequences. But it needs to be effective. There needs to be perception of getting caught. In the US, you hear a lot about scofflaws. Is that a common phrase in Australia? A scofflaw is a law that's written and never been enforced. So why not? So we don't believe in those. There needs to be a deterrent value. The cost for non-compliance has to be far more than the cost of compliance. And again, there needs to be a perception of fairness. You can't say in Calgary, I didn't know I had to license my dog. It's pretty common knowledge. That measurement, last say, confirms if it's being successful or not. Tracks changes or trends in the community. And that's important because we see shifting trends. So we track everything. And I'll get into some stats in a little bit here, give you a detail, but right down to, I can tell you how many labs are in the city, how many pit bulls, how many bichons, whatever. We can tell you by breed what we have. With, I would say, probably 90% accuracy. But the key to all measurement is what are you measuring and what is that going to tell you? Partnerships. I mentioned that first. Every community has 3 groups actively involved around animals. Regulatory groups, that's usually the government. The humane, which could be rescues or RSPCAs or those type of societies. And of course, medical and service providers. We really believe strongly those 3 groups have to find a way to work together. Because everyone has a piece of this puzzle. Everyone has resources they can share, knowledge they can share that help build a stronger, responsible pet owner community. We must always, I think, be working in concert. And yes, we're going to have our disagreements, we have things we can't agree on, but we have to have processes we follow to resolve that and get back to what our core business. We all want the same thing. We want a healthy, animal-friendly community, a safe community. So when we talk about collaboration, what do we expect? That's what everybody thinks collaboration looks like. We're all in this big circle together, and we're all happy. We're A, B, and C. It doesn't work that way, and it shouldn't work that way. This is what collaboration really looks like. Collaboration is that little green piece in the middle. That's where the collaboration lives. And in time, as we learn to trust each other, we'll grow collaborations between different groups, and that will grow bigger. But at the same time, we all want to maintain our identity. You know, private rescue, they got into it for certain business. We don't want them to become beige with the rest of us. They want to maintain that identity, but there's lots we can work on together. And sometimes we agree to disagree. I used to be opposed to feral cat colonies until I met the Meow Foundation and got educated and was shown how it can work effectively. We have to be open to listening and allow people to demonstrate what they can do. So shifting from the animal control to the RPO model, or guardianship model. Comes down to regulating the right and the leash, really. If we can change the human behaviors to being responsible guardians, the animal issues will solve themselves. And again, we've seen that happen on large scale in Calgary, city of 1.2 million. Creating services that people actually want. So licensing is a prime. Licensing seems to be a bugbear for a lot of people, but if you add the value equation, people perceive, and they can see there's true value in a license, then it's a service they'll want to have. And we wanted to be more preventative to reduce the responsive penalizing approach. And I think I heard Graham say about coming in after the serious bite has happened and punishing the owner, it's a bit late. The child would be traumatized for a long time over that. Instead of the parents would be traumatized, the community was traumatized. What can we do to be preventative? And as we know, and I was just on our way over here explaining that, so anybody here read maybe Dunbar's work on 6 levels of aggression? Basically, there are 6 levels of canine aggression. They don't start at level 6. Level 6 is a fatal attack. It starts at level 1, which is usually chasing threatening behaviors that do not get corrected. So if the dog is successful in achieving what he wants by that, postman is the most common one. Why do they always hate the postman? Because he comes out of the property, he rattles that mailbox, you bark, you growl, you throw your other, he leaves. The dog thinks he made that happen. So because he was successful now, he will escalate that and escalate that until he gets corrected. And we talk about that. When a dog steps out of line, that's actually an opportunity. Anyone dog nips somebody, remember if your dog nipped you, he made a conscious choice not to bite you. He had you in his mouth. If he wanted to bite you, he would have sunk the teeth right in. He warned you. But that, to me, is an opportunity where we can actually take that dog and correct that. He's already shown us bite inhibition, which is what we want to see in all dogs, inhibition. So, opportunities, look for opportunities. And that's what this preventative. So we would look at behavior assessment. What's making the dog do what it's doing? Figure that out and start to change that. So when we look at the laws, they actually serve 2 roles. The first is to set a minimum standard for acceptable behavior. That should be the first point of every municipal law, is what's expected, what's the minimum standard. And the next is how to achieve compliance to that standard. And remember, enforcement is one tool in that toolbox of compliance. They also help us live together as neighbors based on some agreed approaches to the rules and provide a process for resolution. So as I said earlier, 95% of cases successfully resolved without going through the court system, which was always our goal, is to reduce that reliance on the court. We applied this to both sides of my business, not just the animal, but the bylaw side, where I'm dealing with anything from noise to untidy properties to neighbor disputes. When we started doing this, our police calls for neighbor fights dropped right off the scale, because we're able to intervene early and resolve this issue between 2 neighbors, so not allowing it to ratchet up and up, and finally they brought into violence. So we know that system works. Performance indicators, when I'm talking about measurement, performance indicators are how do we know we're doing a good job. So what did I measure in animal? I want to look at impounded animal numbers. So how many animals was I picking up and bringing? That's a base indicator of how well animals are being cared for, kept under control. So every year you'd like to see that number go down. Return to owner rates. Animals do get lost. Everybody's dog gets out. My dog got out once. And you think I didn't get razzed about that? When my office called and asked if I was missing something gray and white about this big. So I went and picked her up, and I didn't issue myself a ticket. I gave myself a warning. It was the first thing. But everyone's dog. My mother left the gate open. She forgot we have a dog. And of course the dog went and wandered. So return to owner rate. how good are we getting those animals home quickly? And the quicker the better. We were trying to get up to 50% that when they can come to the shelter, the officer will drive them straight home and they pick them up, keep them in the truck, find them and drive them home. Don't even bring them to the shelter. Incidents involving aggression, want that down. Every year that number's got to come down. Euthanasia rates, down. Percent of animals licensed, we want that up because that drives some of these other measures. Infraction charge, down. And this one always gets politicians because they see enforcement as a revenue. And if anyone's ever been to court, that $100 ticket, it costs me $100 to write the ticket. By the time I get you into court, I'm into $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 with court fees or anything else to collect $100 back. We like to see it go down. I always said if my officers came at the end of a shift and said, well, I patrolled all these parks, these schoolyards, those things, talked to probably 100 dog owners, they couldn't find a violation. That tells me the programs are working. Responsible pet ownership is working. It should be hard to find a violation because people are doing the right thing. And the right thing is so simple to do. And the last one is financial performance. We run the animal service side of the business with no tax support, strictly generated licensing revenue, non-revenue. So a little about the operation side, bylaw compliance, that's Claire. These are the units we use. So they were designed by the officers. They're designed to hold a dog all day if they have to. They're air conditioned or heated. They'll maintain 68 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, water on board, and which allows them to keep the dog with him while he starts the process. So he's got an onboard computer, which is air card linked to our central system, which gives him up to the minute access of all the information we have. He can track the history of the dog in the community, the history of the dog owner, emergency contacts, and he'll start trying to contact them and make arrangements to bring the dog home. We see that as an education minute because he's going to come home with your dog. You're happy to be getting your dog back. We didn't drive all the way back downtown at the end of work. Gives them a chance to find out, talk to you, how the dog get out, what do you need to do. Very effective. The bottom picture, that's the last design the officers put in. Interesting phenomenon in Canada. Dogs are getting bigger. Like we're seeing labs over 100 pounds now. ACOs are getting smaller. 50% male, 50% female, the average female is 115 pounds. So getting a 90-pound dog or 100-pound dog is going to happen. So they've designed this ramp to have the fabricator do it. And it's amazing the dogs will walk right up there. So again, trying to reduce the stress on the dog, stress on officers. Because we are peace officers, these units are equipped with red and blue lights, which is the same as our police and sirens. So they have the authority to stop you. If you have a dog unsecuring your truck, whatever, they have the authority to stop you and deal with that. We have 24 animal control officers. Two key responsibilities are responsible pet owner bylaw and the provincial legislations. That would be like your state, so we're in the province of Alberta. Those are pretty straightforward. The license compliance, animals running at large, animals unattended, animals under control, dogs in off-leash areas, removal of excrement, my favorite one. Barking, howling noise, livestock in the city, aggressive, the vicious and unsecured dogs in open trucks. When we say animals unattended, you cannot leave an animal unattended. So it's like tying your dog up outside the coffee shop where you go for breakfast. When we started putting a stop to that, our bites just took a big drop. It was amazing how many dogs bite because they're left tied up to a bike rack and they're scared. And somebody approaches them and tries to read them and they get bitten. It also involves leaving your car unattended in the car on a very cold or very hot day. So the officers have infrared thermometers. If the temperature inside the car is not within the limits, then they're empowered to open the car and retrieve the dog by whatever means necessary. The provincial, we have a Dangerous Dog Act in Alberta. That's only invoked if you actually want to get a court order to euthanize a dog. We do not euthanize a dangerous dog until we have a court order. So we have to take the case to court, prove it, and the court will issue the order. The Animal Protection Act and the Stray Animals Act, which is actually about livestock. So good barriers. It's about removing barriers to programs. It's making things like licensing easy and market sensitive, easy to get. No cost barrier to programs that are fairly easy to access, that have the resources so people aren't being turned away. It's about public education programs to teach people how to be responsible pet owners. It's about linking people to programs, and that's the beauty of the partnerships. You don't have to do it yourself. You may have a partner that has a great, the Humane Society does a great work called reactive growth, when you have a dog starting to show signs of dog-to-dog aggression. And they work you through that, and it's very successful. So our licensing program, 3 months older, you need a license. Zero tolerance, unless you have an awfully good excuse. It's $250. The license itself is $58 if the dog is intact, $36 if it's altered, but the fine is $250. Cat licensing. This was an interesting case of consultation again. It's that if people understand the regulation, understand what it will do, feel they've been consulted, they will comply. So we put it in January 1st. Throughout the 2 years of consultation, the public told us that cat owners need to be as responsible as dog owners were. And that was a hot debate in the community for a little while, but then people came around. The one cutout was, we heard a lot about, you can't put a license on a cat because he'll get caught up on a tree or something, he'll choke. You know, I've probably talked to 50,000 animal professionals. No one's ever seen a cat skeleton hanging in a tree. We found dog skeletons hanging on fences, but with that, you know what, this is not a hill to die on. So that's again about being able to compromise, being able to sort of come back to, well, what do we want here? So instead of if the cat is microchipped, it doesn't have to have a tag. It has to be licensed, and the tag can sit in the drawer at home. And we'll just tie the license and the chip numbers together like we do for dogs. So not a hill to die on. If you didn't have it chipped, we issued you the license with a brickwork collar. So same as dogs, 3 months or older, low tolerance. Cats we found were less expensive to keep and to maintain, so lower price for a license. So again, that's responding to the public's expectation of the big fair. Because when you go to license cats, the first thing you hear is the term cash grab. This is a huge cash grab of the government. But it costs us money to manage cats in this city as well as dogs. A quickie on the history here. I want to leave some time for questions here. So, like many places, and I think you mentioned that, it's really just a business license function. It doesn't really do anything. Nobody's tracking the data. Nobody can access the data. What good is data that you can't access? It had very low compliance. Nobody followed up on expired licenses. So my predecessor, Jerry, taught council to transfer to animal services for connectivity, because we could use that money to run the program. And we are now fully funded without tax dollars. But council had to put a little money to get the thing kicked off. And that's always the chicken and egg thing. So council kicked up some money for dedicated officers and some staff to man phones that could talk to people and provide licensing, with the understanding that it would move towards the self-funding model. Just some quick stuff about licensing campaigns. The really big one is the ticket home. That's why we license animals. That's how you get animals home effectively. It's also how you prove it's your animal. So the license is really good proof of that. We started this program a few years ago after talking to many Calgarians, because every time there'd be a public forum, we'd always have people there to talk. And we had a lot of people that had licensed their pets faithful for life. My boss actually was responsible for my department, fire, EMS, parks, recreation, social services, big department. Said she'd had her dog for 9 years, had never used our services once. So where was the value? So I said, well, the value is, were you attacked when you walked your dog this morning? No. Did you have to tiptoe around paws of a dog gripper? No. We got some value from license. But we thought maybe we could do more. So we, in Australia, rewards cards at your department stores. As you spend money, you get points. So we set up a reward card system. You get this card free, and you get your license. It's to tell people that being a responsible owner has its rewards. Cards of Tangier adds more value to your license. Using the card a couple times, you can actually recoup your license. And it provides discounts on quality merchant, not just dog stuff, just a couple of shots. You've probably heard of IKEA. Is it popular? Yeah. They give you 10% off if you show this card. There's Inns of Banff Park. Banff, the very popular tourist area of our side of Calgary in the mountains. You get 30% off a room rate for the weekend. And we always say, so if you went there for one weekend with your spouse, you actually got the cost of your dog license back on what you saved. So it's again just an incentive to add more value to the license. We're running about 100 vendors right now. A lot of pet stuff, but oil changes for your car, tires for your car. People seem to like it. We made licensing easy. We send your renewal notice out. Easy payment options. You can do it in person at City Hall or at the animal shelter if you like. And it's amazing. 25% of people want to do it at the animal shelter. They want to come in, they want to see animals, they want to visit, which is good. You can do it over the phone 24/7 by calling 311, our corporate call center. You can do it over the phone any time of the day or night. Or you can do it online yourself. Self-serve, put your own receipt, everything. You can pay with your bills at the bank. You can drop it in the mail. You can drop it in the deposit. or you can even flag down an officer you see in the park and they sell your license right there. His truck's equipped with a debit credit card machine and he can take cash and checks. So we want to make it easy, no barriers at all. For the compliance, we follow up on all license non-renewals. So there's a couple of reasons to do that. One is keep our stats accurate. If you didn't renew, we phone you and you say, well, I'm sorry, but Buster died. So of course we want to exchange our condolences and assure the person you're going to take that off the record so they won't be bothered again. But it keeps your numbers accurate so you know what's going on. And if they're not renewing, then there's an opportunity to talk them into it. Officers can check, we issue a permanent license tag that you renew annually electronically. It costs way too much money to issue a new tag every year, so we give you a permanent stainless steel one. Officers can either go on their onboard computer and check that, or they can phone dispatching and update it so that it's a license accurate and up to date. Park patrols, oddly enough with dogs, well no, that's where you find most of your violations are in parks. Impounded cats and dogs cannot leave the facility with a license, and any animal adopted either from us or any of the rescue groups gets a 3-6-month license. So if you adopt from the Humane Society, Meow, or Animal Rescue Foundation, you get the same free license. The advantage, it allows us to quickly reunite lost animals with their owners. It also identifies that a lost animal has an owner or caregiver. It's not just a stray. You can keep it as somebody's pet they're looking for, and it's one phone call from going home, as we say. A little bit about off-leash areas. Are off-leash areas popular?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the city of Calgary, we have 147 off-leash areas, and they're incredibly popular. The reason we support them so aggressively, it's going to happen anyway. With or without your participation, you will have off-leash. Anybody who's got a big dog knows they need to run them off-leash to get them exercise. It's also a good chance for dogs to socialize. It's a good opportunity for them to become more confident being a little bit further away from the owner, off the leash, but still being under control, and establishing those social relationships with other dogs and with other people. But they need regulation. Some of the challenges we have in Calgary, believe it or not, some of the 147 parks, some are still oversubscribed. They're way too busy, way too many people. And our Parks Department has this multi-use strategy. I think every park should be for everybody. We kind of feel that off-leash parks should be for off-leash, just as soccer fields are for playing soccer and not having picnics in the middle of it. This is my favorite slide. This is why parks planners should never be allowed to design off-leash parks. This is a multi-use paved pathway alongside the river. The pathway, believe it or not, is not off-leash, but either side of it is. So this guy on the bike's riding along, and this Rottweiler, I was very interested in him, but this guy has a sandwich in his bag, which is kind of interesting too. The dog's confused, doesn't know what to do. There's another bike up there, too much activity. The owner's even more confused. It doesn't lead to big complaints of these problems. So we're getting them away from that, slowly but surely, and understanding that the other issue we have is environmental damage. This one here along the river, this river here is the Bow River in Calgary. It's an internationally famous trout fishery, and of course, with all the dog activity, there's no grass up on the bank. We're having erosion, it's growing silt onto spawning beds, so fisheries and oceans is concerned about that, so that all had to be armored and protected. So we have to be smart how we design these things. So the rules are simple. In Calgary, your dog must be on a leash unless it's in an off-leash area or it's on private property with the permission of an owner. The rules of the park are really simple. Your dog must be licensed, he must be under control at all times. We even define control in the bylaw, so if I stop you in the park and that's your dog 200 meters behind you, I'll ask you to call him in. Show me you have control. I'll give you 2 chances. If you can't call him in, then you have to leash him and take him out of the park. Because if you can't call him in and he's just out there, what are you going to do if he starts to chase wildlife or another dog? You have no control over him. So we try to embed that message. Again, I'm not going to write you a ticket. I'm going to have you leash the dog and take it out. And it is an education. We don't allow dogs to chase people, other dogs, wildlife, and of course you must pick up after your dog. Something on the officer training. The key things we hit here are the field safety, of course, dog handling, lift slow transporting, leash techniques, capture and control tools, breeds and behaviors, and aggressive incident investigation. The officer field safety and the dog handling, we train with live dogs, and personally I don't know how you learn how to capture a dog until you've actually tried to catch one. And so we bring in, it starts with our staff dogs, which are pretty predictable animals. We start with the little ones first, and we kind of graduate you up, and then the instructor will deliberately put Mickey's pit bull beside another girl stand staff, knowing these two dogs do not get along. We want something to happen, but the instructors are in release, nothing bad happens. But the officers begin to see, when did the dog's demeanor change? And so what happened? Did he lock stare on it? Because when the dog locks stares, we say the target has been selected. How do you break that? And the officers have to know this, how to read that body language, and then how to get control over the animal. It builds officer confidence, and of course, a confident officer, the dog is certainly a lot easier to handle if the dog senses that you know exactly what you're doing, and you're not afraid. And learning about animal behavior. So we do all this, it's a fairly extensive course. All this is how to load them safely in the truck without getting bitten, without hurting them, without hurting you. And I can say that it's extremely rare we ever have an officer bitten by a dog. It's incredibly rare. It's even more rare that we have an animal injured during capture or transport. So the canine behavior, our behaviors comes and teaches us, but of course, about how to send a calming signal to a dog. A dog at large, he's scared, he's running. You have to start to develop a relationship. We definitely don't want to just go and pull and drag him in. We want him to come willingly, a lot calmer. How to know when a dog is sending you a distance increase signal, when he's sending you a decrease signal. Does he tell you it's okay to come closer to me now? These are easy things to read when an expert teaches you. Again, it's about building the confidence of the officer. And we do that things, with under control. So she's learning what to do when the dog's jumping around, she's going to control back on that. We even went so far, we have two dogs that train officers. One is a Belgian Tervern, and the other is a 90-pound Amstaff. And they've actually been trained to key on a vice loop. And so the officer goes with the dog, and the dog is given the command to take the sleeve. And the dog's going to try and pull you to the ground because that's what dogs do. What the officer will train to do is how to get out of that and get control back. Now the safety mechanism, the dog knows this is just a game, so if the officer feels it's too intense, just straighten her arm. The dog pulls the sleeve off, the dog won, and the dog stops. But it's important that if you ever get caught by a dog, and it can happen, you need to know what to do, how you're going to get out of it, how you're going to get control back on this situation. We even do that at the end of the course. It's kind of interesting because we'll take a dog that's in custody, an extremely aggressive dog, and release it in a secure compound. The officer has a choice. Are you ready to go and capture that dog now? And you will, of course, have backup with you, so nothing bad can happen. Some people will do it, some people won't. Some people are too afraid. But last thing we learn is about the aggressive investigation. It's very similar to any kind of a criminal investigation. It's a multi-step. The first thing is we've got to get control of the animal. The animal's been in a serious incident. We have to get it into custody. To send a calming signal to the community, the dog is in custody and under investigation, the danger is past. We want to ensure that the victim is assisted in every way possible, even to after the fact, about counseling sessions through victims assistance with the police, how to get through that. Get the facts, collect the evidence, determine the action to be taken, and then follow it through. And when I say that, we have no BSL, but we do have some of the strictest regulations on animal aggression because we don't believe that it's unacceptable for any breed of dog. This one here, again, this is interesting. This came from a U.S. colleague of mine, that baby. Parents woke up in the morning, the baby had all those marks, the puppy was in the crib, so they called animal services. The dog didn't do that. And the fellow that investigated is a friend of mine, that's an expert. What do you think did that to the kid? Those are rat bites. And what happens, the kid was put to bed and the parents didn't wash him properly, and then the night the rats would come out, this is in the southern U.S., the puppy probably prevented worse from happening. So it's a case where you identify what really happened here and make the protocol to Child Protective Services and get some education to the parents. But again, just some examples, dog on dog with on a person, investigate, get the facts, follow through. We do animal assessment on dogs involved in incidents and dogs being made available for adoption. Two different assessments we do. So a dog that's been involved in an incident, that could be as simple as a chase threat. It does not have to have escalated yet. But let's say once or twice we've had complaints on a chasing threat. What we want to do is determine what may have triggered that behavior and assessing and determine recommendations. So we have a couple of things we do. We can seal a charge. We could issue a nuisance order against the dog, which the director has the authority to do, or we could take it to court for a vicious animal order. The charges of the cut and ride, chase, threat, $200 ticket. Nuisance order. That's when the director can put conditions on the nuisance order to have the dog confined in a certain way, control measures, perhaps a muzzle in public or a shorter leash, and can actually order training by a certified pet dog trainer with specific attention to the details that our behaviors have identified in the dog. The advantage of the nuisance order is it doesn't require the court and it can be lifted at any time. We do an assessment after the first year. If the dog's record has been clean all year, we reassess it and the problem is solved. The order's lifted, the dog's record is clean. That gives the owners an incentive to want to do it. The court orders is usually for more serious, and usually if you're looking at, you're going to request the court to have the animal euthanized because it's that far off the rails and it's not susceptible to correction. The problem with the lesser offense is once you issue a dangerous litter report, it's there for life. There is no way to remove that order. So we wanted to put something intermediate to give an owner who is otherwise responsible, just said didn't know what he was doing, who's made the corrections, going to want to give that incentive to want to get his dog off the list. On those ones of the orders I issued while I was director, 98% were lifted after the first year. They were going to have done the right thing, gone to the trainer. It's sometimes with the trainer, it's the simplest thing to correct, but it takes an expert sometimes. Dogs prepared for adoption, you basically look at 4 types of animals you're going to see. Open adoption, that's those great dogs who go home with anybody. Adopt with conditions, and sometimes we'll be looking for somebody who had maybe breed experience or big dog experience, or if the conditions showed the dog had some food aggression, is the person willing to go through some training, what's going to take, and those are always usually very successful. Some will hold for initial training or retest. Sometimes you test the dog, it's too soon, and it's still too highly strung from being lost, getting captured, brought into a shelter. So it's up to the behaviorist. If she says, I want to put this dog through some initial training or be assessed, she can do that. And then of course there's some that are simply not suitable for adoption. Public education, I spoke about that. We start in the school system. These are part of the school curriculum programs. I had 3 teachers on my staff that went out and did these kind of programs, right from kindergarten, ECS, through grade 6. Education is important because it corrects people's misconceptions or myths. And we always say, you know, for the people, animal officers have really had a number done on them by Walt Disney, Cruella de Vil and all that. They're painted in such a negative light. For the most part, every person I know in animal control loves animals. They're there because they care and they want to do a good job. So we need to correct that myth. It also supports knowledgeable citizens, people understanding why. For example, why do you have to pick your dog food? Well, there's huge health issues around it. And you can imagine that one park I showed you, we'll get 3,000 dogs a day through that park. Nobody picked up. Within a week, you wouldn't use that park. We actually did a piece with the media. I worked with the dean of our veterinary college, and we figured with all the different breeds, the average dog would put about 400 grams a day. So in Calgary, with 130,000 dogs, that's 55 tons of dog food a day. So if people aren't picking up, it's not going to work. It helps transform misunderstanding. A lot of problems come from people simply didn't understand. Changes behavior, and it's, I believe, a real key to getting voluntary compliance. So the target is always you want a community of responsible pet owners who understand the rules, know the rules, support the rules, do the right thing. I'll go over this really quickly because I want to save time in case you have questions. Our bite prevention program, we teach it right through kindergarten, right through grade 6. Teaches children how not to be bitten by dogs. We find a stray dog, what do? Dogs in society, urban coyotes. Do you have coyotes in Australia or just dingoes? It's our version of a dingo. Yeah. Anyway, they have a habit of encroaching into the city because we have so much natural area. Creates a lot of problems. Freedom City and Junior Bylaw. They're all curriculum based. We focus the message we want to give on something the kids are supposed to learn anyway. So usually in the social studies or science focus. Very appropriate support materials, interactive. We do it in a classroom setting, not in an assembly, and we do not use a live dog. We learned early on that they bring a live dog in and the kids stop listening to it. They just want to make contact with the dog, pet the dog, play with the dog. There's no cost to the school for this. The budget comes from licensing. So again, the bite prevention, the whole thing about stray dogs, don't make eye contact. That's to stand like a tree, lay like a log. Most dogs will go right past you. If you're not moving, your hands are tucked in, you're not looking at them, you're not very interesting. Reasons dogs, we don't bite. Why does a dog bite? Meaning a dog is out with his owner, how you ask for permission, how you approach a dog. And then we use these tools. That's Joanne, she's brilliant. She uses this plush Burmese mountain dog. It's Boomer, who's got a rap sheet so long. He's been up so many times. And it's all inquiry-based learning. So anyone's in the education business, that's where the children are given the right information. If you inquire, they develop the answer themselves. It sticks with them a lot longer. And she'll open up with this dog saying, I found this dog out at the parking lot, what should I do? And then we'll call the police, drive it to the vet. And then she'll introduce, oh look, he's wearing a license, what does it say? Oh, there's a phone number, call Animal Services. So she goes on the radio and they go through that whole different thing. Every once in a while you get the smart kid that says, you know lady, it's not a good dog. And that's where we got this one with our humane partners about dogs in society. And they're saying of living things. Dogs are living things, cats are living things. They're not inanimate objects, they need different care and concern and treatment. And it starts focusing on responsible pet ownership and safety. Best time, really to get children at a young age in school are so acceptable to these ideas. They carry these home with them. They may not solve all your problems in the current generation, so you start targeting the next one coming up. They're coyotes, again, typically not aggressive towards humans, but as they become habituated, they get quite bold. And they will take people's cats or small dogs. And I think we've had one case of a coyote biting a person. But it's every case of coyotes we looked at as a human problem. People not keeping their garbage under control, people not cleaning up behind their pets. A coyote is the most adaptable animal in the world. We have dog species are food to a coyote. Coming to your yard to get your dog and cat food that you left outside. So we found if we could work with the human problem, the coyotes would stay back in the natural areas where they should be. It worked. So we weren't out shooting coyotes, which is something we don't want to do. Because they have a role in the balance of nature. We have, like I'm sure you have your rabbit problem, you have our rabbit problem, gopher problems. Coyotes are actually an important part of that whole ecosystem. And we want them in the natural areas doing what they should be doing. So the kids learn about what to do to make them feel unwelcome, and what to do if you're approached by one, because it's quite different if you're approached by a dog. And of course the difference between the dog and the coyote. Freedom City, really quickly, this is again teaching kids why we have laws. So there's a whole series of line drawings that kids look at and they identify what the problems are. It's called Freedom City because it's perfect. There are no rules because everything's perfect. And the kids identify all the different issues in the drawing, and then they have a discussion about what should it be. So why we have bylaws for public health and public safety, protect the environment, so we can live in harmony. Junior bylaw is just the next step up where the kids actually move into the problem solving. Animal issues often come up in these discussions, and they work towards researching what the rules are, solutions, what's positive, what's the best solution, why, and how would you inform local government. So it's again developing a good citizenship model. In the school presentations, just to give you so 372 presentations in the 09-10 school year, spoke to 8,732 students about safety around animals and bite prevention at no cost to the school board or the taxpayer. Those performance indicators, it's the same ones I showed you earlier. We'll just skip along and see how we're doing. So our population, this is 2010. We just had a census done in May. We're up to just under 1.2 million. Dogs and cats, how do I know how many dogs and cats I have? We have to do a census in Canada every year because a lot of our funding for government comes on a per capita basis. So you have to know how many people live in this valley. So it's a door-to-door survey the city clerk undertakes. For the Princess Emma, $30,000, she will also ask how many cats, how many dogs. So I would do that survey about every 5 years because it's expensive. And what we find is that, believe it or not, it's pretty accurate because those are the last questions that get asked. So you get into a mode of just answering the questions. How many dogs do, how many cats belong. And we get the information on the promise that we would never use it to direct an enforcement program to any specific area that we identify as being weak in licensing. But it gives us that ability to track these numbers. So when talking about changing trends, we can see here, the lighter green bar is cats. Well, we've had a declining cat population. Pretty consistent, the dogs seem to be consistently tracked with the human population. Cats kind of peaked up and then tapered off a little bit. Now Calgary's, it's suburbia. It's about 900 square kilometers of city. It's a lot of single family homes back there. So we do expect higher dog ownership and lower cat ownership just based on that alone. We don't have that much multifamily. So compliance. So 111,500 as of the end of December 11. That's about a 90% compliance rate on licensing. Cats, 55% compliance. Calgary at 51,500 has more licensed cats in the city of Calgary than every other city in Canada put together. We're the only city that actually put together a cat licensing program that's worked. So how did it work? Our impounds dropped. Our return to owner rates went up, but in 11 they dropped a little bit. But that was balanced off by more adoptions. So we ended up with between 82 and 80% return live release of cats, as opposed to 7%, which is the average. So when I saw that number drop, we thought, well, we're the city, we have some really cool tools available to us. We know where cats are picked up, because they're usually caught in a live trap in someone's yard where we've been a nuisance. So we have an address. We can enter that address in the city's geo-base, and I can get every address in that vicinity. I can say go 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks. So we designed this little card, and the cat comes in, we get the picture of the cat in the cage for specific reasons. Then we mail these cards out the next morning of the addresses around where the cat came in. Creates some guilt. Basically it says that I was found in your neighborhood on July 1st and brought to the Animal Service Center. If you know my owners, please tell them where I am. They can pick me up between 10 and 7. Became remarkably effective at returning cats quickly. And again, we want the cat out as fast as we can get it back home. And with some education, the owners know what they need to do. So this was just the cats, 91. That's how many cats were being brought in. A lot of them being euthanized. It's a dark green bar, claimed. When we see over the years drop, that was dropping. This is when we started talking about, this started going back up again. That's when we started talking about cat licensing, because we had such a record on returning dogs because of licensing. And the only difference between dogs and cats was that they weren't licensed. So the dogs impounded, in around that 4,500 dogs impounded. 87% went straight home to the owner, 36% driven directly home, 8% adopted, 5% euthanized, so 95% live release on dogs. So to put those numbers into perspective, you take that, that's about, let's say about 3% of the dogs in Calgary get into trouble. 0.3% actually get involved in a chase or a bite. So that's the other thing we have to keep in mind is that when we're dealing with animal aggression, we're dealing with a very small component. And so that's why a broad brush approach isn't working so well, because the vast majority of dogs are okay. They're not a problem. So you need to have tools that actually allow you to specifically address that problem when you're problem dog, without alienating the ones who are your best representatives of solid dog owners. A little bit of the disposition, so of course you see the green is the return. Aggressive dog incidents, does it work? Well, 1985, 2,000 incidents. 2010, that's about 475 incidents, of which 123 are actual bites. And a bite could be a nip with just a minor puncture or a scrape if it left a mark. That line up here shows our population growth at the same time. Calgary's been under huge growth. So we're from a population over here of about 650,000 to a population of 1.1 million. At the same time, with no breed bans and no pet limits, we're able to bring down the animal aggression. A little bit about operating budget, costs 5.9 million Canadian dollars, pretty close to Australian dollars right now. All generated through license and penalty. Now, penalty revenue accounts for about 400,000 of that. It's licensing. The center itself was built in 2000 for 3.5 million. We're open to the public 7 days a week, except for stat holidays. Shorter shifts on Saturdays, Sundays. 21,000 square foot facility. Holds 88 cats, 84 dogs. Since we've been in this program, we've never been at capacity. We always have capacity. In fact, enough capacity if we have a rescue partner who's got a problem with overcapacity, we can actually take animals to help them out. And that's, again, that's the return to owner. The most cost-effective way to empty a shelter is return them home with education. The shelter itself, if you ever get to Calgary, I hope you do, you should come and visit. You'll be surprised. It doesn't smell. It's quiet, it's clean, it's got a high-tech ventilation system, aggressive isolation kennels, so we don't handle aggressive dogs. They're allowed to move freely from kennel to kennel, and we use guillotine doors to control them for cleaning. So we're not challenging that dog twice a day with a control pole while we drag it to a new kennel so we can clean them. We can actually let him calm down. They'll go to the new kennel with the food in it. We close the gate, staff go in and clean. They actually seem to calm down quite a bit within a week. Waste management system, again, everything is flushed out of the building. And as much as a government shelter can be, it's a warm atmosphere. It's not over the top, it's clean, it's simple. That's just the front entrance. Front counter, we don't let people wander the kennels without supervision. A number of reasons for that. One is the person with them, usually a health tech, can tell them a lot about the animals and if they're looking to adopt. We don't want little kids in there shoving their hands in with the animals, creating problems, stressing them. So everything is supervised. Continuous improvement. So we wanted to build that spay-neuter clinic so we could actually effectively do low-income spay-neuters. That was a big leap. That's where our vets really stepped up because in Alberta, you actually have to have 51% vet ownership to be a licensed clinic. And with their support, we were the first clinic that was not owned by vets, it was licensed by the province. Took a long time to get there, but with their help, we did it. So that opened in 2009, it's been quite successful. We want to increase the number of licensed cats. We do that every year. Dogs, we'd like to get that 100%. We did some research on the lifetime license with the microchip, and I'm going to talk to you more about that because there's pluses and minuses to it, you're right. 100% return owners, our goal is always more use of that drive-home program. It's so cost-effective when you can drive an animal straight home. And people, when they talk to us, they say, how can you afford to do that? Remember, we're a city of 900 square kilometers. So if you pick a dog up in a new area and you're going to drive it all the way back to the central part of the city where the shelter is, that's about a 45-minute drive. Hour if you stop to pick up a coffee for the drive. You get to the shelter, you unload the animal, you book it, you make a few phone calls, you chat to the pretty health techs, and then you load up in another hour. You've been off the job for 2.5 hours, where the truck is set up, the dog is comfortable and safe in there, stay in your zone, keep working, keep trying to contact the owner. It's actually incredibly cost effective. You save a lot of money. And you also keep that high presence of the vehicles always in the community. And of course, our goal is to be a best practice in animal management. We know we have no more homeless pets, and we're already at the level of what Best Friends would say is a no more homeless pet community. The clinic itself, we opened it in July 6, 2009. It's a pretty nice clinic, 2 tables, no waiting, heated. We've got full monitors, IV pumps, all that stuff. We have, this is our dental suite. We found a lot of dogs' adoptability came down to often dental. And a good cleaning for a big dog in Calgary is $200. But the reality is if I have the dog asleep, being neutered or spayed anyway, the vet can just do the teeth right then and there for very little extra cost to me and makes the dog more adoptable. Doing other minor surgical corrections. Cats surprised me. I had no idea that cats had the dental problems they did. I always just knew more about dogs, but we found a lot of cats have dental issues. Again, we can correct that economically, make the animal more adoptable. The other thing that can spin off benefit is it helps us keep vets. We find a lot of clinics like this, it's hard to keep a vet because all they're doing is spaying and neutering, and so a lot of their skills are deteriorated. So here they're getting access to high-end dental and keeping all of their vet skills very sharp. What do we have here? That's the prep area, 4 tables. They can double as surgery tables if we're doing a big push on spay and neuters and have volunteer vets coming in to help out and donate their time. And the last is our X-ray room. We can do full body X-ray, we can do dental X-ray. A lot of times you get a dog come in and the officer, the tech will just feel the dog isn't sitting or walking properly, but there's no outside. So you run a quick X-ray, it's digital, it costs nothing. You find out it's actually got a broken hip or a broken shoulder. And so in the surgery he goes and gets fixed out, so they sit there and suffer. The goals for the clinic were simple business efficiencies, really drove it. We couldn't afford to pay mainstream costs for that kind of help. Our license only allows us to spay and neuter city-owned pets and do surgery on city-owned pets. If we're spaying and neutering a low income, the only surgery we can do would be as if the vet's got the dog open and sees a life-threatening situation, he can correct that. But no other work on it. That was part of the conditions of licensing. And again, it was, of course, to increase adoption by doing those minor surgeries and dental work and the low income. That in a nutshell.